being recorded. This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. We'll just have a couple of minutes to let everyone join in. Thank you. Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. In case you didn't catch that, let's just wait a couple of minutes to let more people join in, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Hi, good morning. And for the ones that have just joined us, thank you very much. I mentioned earlier, we're just waiting a couple of minutes to let more people join and then we'll get started. Thank you.
Growing up, we all had dreams. Like everyone else, you crave the power to fulfill those dreams. Running a business, you seek the power to transform your ideas into epic solutions. In the comfort of your home, you desire the power to inspire memorable family times. Excited about your dream job, you pray for the power to grow and become the best. As you chase your passion into the hinterlands, you realize that power is needed to connect people. In your guest houses, hotels and restaurants, you must power up your facilities to excite your customers. Every other day, in the classrooms, offices and boardrooms, people debate the power to meet their goals. Now, with energy, powering all your dreams is now a reality. Energy's best-in-class solar systems deliver reliable 24/7 electricity. Let's power your homes and businesses the clean way. Energy, delivering reliable energy solutions on your terms.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining today. So we have a number of people here, so we can get started. Good morning to my panelists. Hope you've had great week up to here, and we're grateful to have you. Okay, so thank you for joining the final session of the year, the Energy Sustainability Series. Today, we will be discussing accelerating a clean energy transition through renewable energy technologies with our esteemed panelists, Kweku Osei-Sarpong, who leads RIFE International Operations in West Africa, as well as facilitates access to capital and investments for the successful execution of decarbonizing the facilities access to capital and decarbonizing the electricity supply for the government, private sector, and individuals through solar energy and other energy efficient conservation measures. Through his work, he has created several jobs in Ghana and other parts of Africa. Some of his most recent achievements include being awarded West Africa Nobles Award for Business Excellence and Integrity in 2022, and 40 Under 40 Awards under Environmental and Climate Sustainability, also in 2022. Also with us today, we have Dr. Patrick Agassi, who leads the activities at PAM Africa, whose key goal is to develop advanced energy innovations for a more sustainable Africa continent. He's a contributing member of the Institution of Engineering and Technology and has been recognized by the IChemE Global Awards and the Black British Businesses Awards for his contribution to clean energy innovations. Unfortunately, Sana Hachimi could not be here with us today due to poor health. So moving on, we know that the annual global conference called COP, which is the short form of Conference of Parties, is held every year, and this year was the 27th year. It held in Egypt from the 6th of the 18th of this month. And it is the first time the conference is being held in an African nation. And it's interesting to note that Africa produces less than 4% of the world's greenhouse gases, but is the most vulnerable to climate change. It has been recorded that there has been an increase in temperature of about 0.7 degrees Celsius across the continent, and this will result in an increase in drought and floods. This will also further impact other aspects of living, such as a decrease in food production and an increase in waterborne diseases, as well as malaria. The conversations that have been had around climate change are mostly focused on the global north and rarely take into consideration how low of a priority climate change may be for those in the global south. Last year's report from COP26 was that climate change is real and it's occurring at an alarming and dangerous rate. Whilst this year, industry experts, activists, and organizations continue to put pressure on world leaders to raise their ambitions and accelerate their actions to achieve goals set from previous conferences. That being said, back to the topic of accelerating a clean energy transition through renewable energy technologies, I believe ecosystems and a lot of money are required. But let's go to our experts, starting with Kweku. Hi, Kweku. So our first question is directed to you. What critical infrastructure and investments are required to accelerate clean energy adoption in rural and urban areas?
Sure, thank you very much. And good morning to everybody on this medium today. This is a very heavy question, and I believe I'll try to do as much work that I can to it. It's in two parts. So we speak about infrastructure and then we speak about investment, right? Within the infrastructural framework, we are talking about technology, we are talking about policy, we are talking about socioeconomic factors, that make, businesses or environments in Africa more suitable for foreign players to come in. And, looking at that from that perspective, the first thing I like to tackle would be technology. I think one of the biggest things that we need to do locally here in Africa is to standardize our technology. So we are working with tier 1 equipments because the nature of clean energy in itself, case in point, renewable energy, is long term. We hope that our installations are able to last 25 years as per the claims of the manufacturer. And that is only recognizable when we are able to get the right technology. I believe that the policy and regulatory framework should have a very robust standardization practice that allows these technologies to be leveled down through. Also, another important factor on the infrastructure will be the smart grid infrastructure. depending on whether you are doing a rural electrification project or you are focusing on the commercial and industrial, you need some type of grid infrastructure to make it work, especially for the CNI space. What we've seen mostly in West Africa is our grid infrastructure is not mature enough to be able to accelerate clean energy. So there's available capital, technology, but now from the government stakeholder perspective, there's a best because our grid infrastructure is not modern enough to be able to accelerate that. And then I've already spoken about government policy, and I believe the last aspect is capacity building. There has to be capacity built within the various stakeholders that accelerate clean energy. What do I mean by that? I mean by the national electricity companies. I mean the other, state-owned enterprises, etc., that are all playing major roles within the, electricity framework. And that will bring me down to one of my most interesting subjects, which is the investments. Mostly we'll hear a lot of conversations about acceleration of clean energy, and the first thing you hear about is lack of access to capital. I believe in 2022, there is no lack of access to capital. In fact, in the area of climate action, in the area of clean energy, in the area of renewables, there is potentially more capital than there is available opportunities to fund. And what do I mean by that? When you look at the plethora of funding that exists in the ecosystem today, you have funding coming from DFIs, you have debt financiers, you have equity financiers, you have grants, etc., that are able to do blended financing. All of that is available. And unfortunately, it's just going to a few developers, a few EPC companies that are able to have the right structures to be able to attract that. So the problem is not so much of a capital or investment problem as it is a structuring problem. That's what we've seen, in the market. And I believe once there's a lot of capacity building around how developers, EPC companies can really structure their transactions to be able to attract the right capital, that will go a long way in helping accelerating, clean energy. The other aspect of the capacity building I would like to also speak about is regarding the local financial sector. I believe outside of the inflows of foreign direct investment within the sector of clean energy, there's also the available capital locally here. There are banks, there are savings and loans, there are credit unions, etc., that have enough capital to advance some credit. Outside of that, when you look at the alternative assets classes, there's also private equity companies that are typically do investments in real estate. There are venture capitals, that are only focused on fintech these days. And there is pension funds, that do not have a mandate to accelerate clean energy. Hence, VCs and Ps are not able to access that. So within that, there is a gap, and the gap is really capacity building. If our local financial sector can understand clean energy and the importance of accelerating it, and they can build structures to, assist as asset classes that are focused on that, that will go a long way, to help with acceleration. I think credit must be given where credit is due. We've seen a lot of commercial banks gravitating towards this path. The only challenge with them has been that there is an inherent problem, which is maturity mismatch. They are normally focused on short-term lending, whereas with these solutions that we provide within the clean energy space, we need some type of patient, long-term capital. So 3 things that I've mentioned here, I believe that technology should be standardized. I also believe that, government and policy, should really look at how they can create the necessary socioeconomic environment, at the same time improve the physical infrastructure to make the acceleration easier. And then I believe capacity building should happen also on the investment side, both for EPC developers to know how to structure, and then most importantly for the local financial sector, so that they can understand the asset class, and then they can also help with the local resources that we have to push the clean energy agenda.
Thank you very much for that, Kweku. Very insightful. To the audience, if you have any questions, please just drop them in the Q&A box and we'll address them at the end. And for you, Patrick, what major skills can facilitate higher deployment and adoption of renewable power sources? And how can these skills be easily accessible in Africa?
No, thank you so much, Valeria. And that when it comes to skills, it's always very important. I mean, we face that on a day-to-day level when it comes to the availability of skill sets in this sector in Nigeria specifically. Just to give you a bit of context, there's roughly the renewable energy sector in Nigeria employs about 50,000 people, according to the recent report from the Power for All program. And when we compare that to the oil and gas sector, we're looking at about 65,000 people being employed in the oil and gas sector. And considering the oil and gas sector has been established for a longer period of time compared to the renewable energy sector, you can definitely see the significant growth in the amount of opportunities the renewable energy sector provides. Now, when we're looking at that going into 2023, which is next year, there's forecast of almost up to 76,000 new jobs in the sector. And that would definitely be now peaking above the oil and gas sector. So in summary, we're looking at a huge growth in job opportunities that will be coming in from the renewable energy sector. But when it comes to the specific skills that's required, I mean, we're seeing a lot of engineering skills needed, kind of quality engineering skills needed. So just like the previous speaker talked about, that kind of capacity building activity needs to be definitely accelerated in order to meet the demand for skills in this area. So a lot more training needs to be going on the ground level to kind of build the right engineers that can actually go ahead and deliver the capacity of solutions that we need. Other than that, marketing and maintenance needs to kind of be improved as well. We're seeing a need for that. How do we best communicate this message to the people? Communication seems to be a big challenge, because if you talk to a typical user or someone who actually wants to kind of go to solar, the first thing they think about is cost. They think, oh, wow, this is very expensive. How do we go ahead to solve this? But if you actually kind of communicate the long-term benefits and also different kind of financing options available for them, they can then see that the cost is much more comparative when it comes when you're comparing it to a diesel or petrol generator. So we're seeing a lot of that communications, that's marketing activities that needs to be done. And I think honestly, you guys are doing some good work around that. So it's well done for that, actually. And what also another thing I was saying is also on the finance side of things, companies like developers like Pan Africa and others in this field really need to kind of invest in heavily into kind of understanding various financial structures that are out there, so we can pass this incentive down to the end consumer and reduce the cost. So across those three areas, I would say that's what needs to be done in terms of improving the skill sets in this area, and also attracting the right talent and building on the right talent in this area.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for that insight. But to move into clean energy, something needs to happen to our current technology that's being powered by fossil fuels. So Kweku, what challenges currently hinder the global efforts to transition from fossil fuels to cleaner renewable sources?
All right. You know what? I typically don't like the conversation so much about, it's almost like a fight between fossil fuels and renewable energy, which I don't think is the case. When you look at an economy like Africa, and West Africa to be precise, the oil and gas, exploration, production, etc., has really empowered African states. And just to throw away those resources in the name of going green, really makes a lot of people anxious. I believe it's so much of a transition as it is of a replacement, right? So what a transition basically means is, how can the current oil and gas industry collaborate with an emerging clean energy industry to provide value to both the environment and then to the people within the subsector. How I see that happening is, like I mentioned, collaboration, which is being led by some of the oil and gas companies that are rebranding themselves as energy companies. So we see that collaboration happening. But in practical reality, there is various ways that can happen. So for instance, renewable energy in itself has a very inherent risk, and the inherent risk is intermittent in nature. So when you look at, let's say, production of energy by solar, you are basically limited to the times the sun is out, and then also you are also exposed to fluctuations in weather conditions. So it means that solar in itself cannot provide 360 energy for any type of use. It needs to be hybridized. That hybridization, opportunity creates the value that the current fossil fuel industry won't be able to provide. We know that gas is a transition fuel, from fossil fuels. And if the company is able to focus on gas production, then there could be some type of marriage between renewable energy and gas, where, for instance, solar would be able to provide daytime energy production. And then at nighttime, gas is, replacing the solar that cannot be produced because of the sunlight. So I see a lot of collaboration versus hindrance. I believe a lot of it has to be, again, capacity building and education. Once both parties are able to understand the value they bring to the table, once they're able to think futuristically and, assess the value that they provide to both the environment and then also the people within the sub-region, then some of these collaborative efforts, can happen. But I must definitely applaud some of the forward-looking organizations that are doing that. I know there are some companies that are very forward-looking. I know Total is currently looking at EV, etc. So there is some progress there, but I believe capacity building, again, is one of the biggest challenges. Once we can invest a lot more in capacity building, we can invest a lot more in catalytic financing that allows some of these early stage development, technology opportunities, projects to come to life. We should be much closer to accelerating clean energy.
Thank you very much, Kweku. That's a very interesting way of looking at it, as opposed to a fight on the fossil fuels against renewable energy. Thank you very much for that. So Dr. Patrick, what policies and programs are needed to accelerate and mitigate the effects of moving from fuel-powered operations towards clean and renewable alternatives?
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, when it comes to policies and programs, there's a huge amount of skepticism out there in terms of, there's a lot of them that have been launched in the past, and the question is, how effective have they been, right? But I would actually take my hats off to kind of the Nigerian government lately, and kind of the work that they're doing to kind of drive energy access in Africa. There's kind of a huge amount of work that has been gone into thinking and planning and actual implementation. Two key programs kind of come to my mind when I think about some of the policies and the programs in place at the moment. One is the Solar Power Niger program, which aims to kind of electrify 25 million Nigerians. And that's kind of driven down through the REA, and seeing a lot of work being done in that area. Another thing that actually came to mind, which is the recently launched Nigerian Energy Transition Plan, which discussed around Nigerian aiming to be net zero by 2060. And that's quite exciting. Although it's a little bit far away, I feel that hopefully we do get to kind of become a net zero country very soon, much more before 2060. But the kind of the path indicated that was going to be looked at was through a mixture of solar, gas, and hydro, and hopefully phasing out our reliance on coal and oil. And that's quite interesting to see that transition plan being launched. And hopefully most of the companies out in the sector align themselves towards that plan and ensure to meet that plan. But we're not going to stop there. I mean, there's other things going out, a lot of support coming in from DFIs and donor organizations in this space. We're seeing a lot of conversations around tariff waivers, how we can waive from the tariff for importing goods into the country, especially renewable energy parts and goods. And those are welcome suggestions, but if the kind of leadership party that's responsible for the custom clearing is not in conversations with what's been happening on the finance side of things, then that's a big issue, and those kind of tariff waivers do not end up getting reflected to the end consumer. So there's a lot more that needs to be done in terms of structuring that and kind of who's going to govern that operation and driving that to see the benefits being reflected to the developers or the other sort of companies that are out there. Also, there's conversations around kind of increasing the use of more local content. If for example, we're getting all this funding coming into Africa and the government is supporting all these projects with their own funding, but if about 80% of that funding goes back to China or goes to Germany or another country, that is not a good look and it's not a good thing for Nigerians and Africans in general. So we need to start thinking about how we can encourage more local content in our products, especially renewable energy products. And one of the reasons why the oil and gas sector is kind of a huge contribution to the Nigerian GDP and economy is because it's coming from Nigeria, right? So we need to kind of figure out how renewable energy can come from Nigeria and increase more local content. So I think across those key areas, I feel that yes, there's a lot of policies and programs that are currently have been initiated, but I don't know if they're going to be effective enough. And we need to kind of explore other areas like the ones which I just mentioned and really drive down on those.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And just to piggyback off Patrick and Kweku have said, they mentioned a lot of the involvement of gas needed. It's interesting to know that 15 buses in Lagos State run on gas. The government are working on increasing this number, as well as the rail lines, 2 currently run on electric and 1 on diesel, and they are currently looking at ways to, as Kweku mentioned, hybridize the system and to also leverage clean energy as well as integrate with existing technology that's fueled by fossil fuels. Moving on, as I mentioned, we've spoken a lot about leveraging technology and innovations. So back to you, Kweku. Why are renewable energy sources preferable to traditional sources when seeking efficient power supply for domestic and commercial purposes?
Thank you very much. I'll address efficiency from 2 perspectives. I'll address it from both cost efficiency and then also power generation efficiency as well. Domestic and commercial are essentially 2 different landscapes when it comes to the power sector, and how power is produced and basically generated and used has also quite different routes. I'll address this from first the domestic, and then I can move a bit to the commercial side. So from a domestic perspective, we know that typically a lot of, I would say 99% of, households are basically plugged into the power grid, right? So at that point, power production comes from a very centralized point, which is typically the government of that particular country producing the power going through all the other, transmission stations to get it to the end user. From a cost efficiency perspective, renewable energy is getting less costly every year. So when you look at the cost of producing solar today versus the cost of producing solar 5 years ago, it has definitely reduced, right? So from a cost perspective, it's much cheaper to produce power from renewable energy, which would then ensure that the trickle-down benefits of that cost reduction gets to the end user in the form of tariffs. What I do mean by that is, assuming we generated production of energy from solar today in 2022 versus we did from hydro, the independent power producer or the government that is producing the power at a certain kilowatts, per hour is going to have to then transfer that cost of that power plus the maintenance and all the transmission costs to the final end user, which is going to end up increasing their tariffs. However, if the cost is lower, then it still goes to that same mill, and then it gets to the end user at a much cheaper tariff. So at that point, from a cost efficiency perspective, renewable energy is definitely a no-brainer. Now, from a power production perspective, that has to do with also the clean nature of it. We know the benefits of renewable energy. Sometimes we don't really understand the climate effect of it because we are in our home and we have our air conditioning and TV and some entertainment, and we wonder how can just me enjoying my life, be very hazardous to the environment. But think about a million other households like yourself that is enjoying power from a 100 megawatt system that is producing tons of CO2. Those are very harmful to our environment. It is disrupting farming. It is disrupting, fishes in the oceans, which forms about 40% of our protein. It's affecting our health, etc. So when we put all of that into perspective, first, we know that the cost of producing renewable energy is cheaper, so definitely our bills are going to be cheaper. But most importantly, we are not going to have food shortages, we are not going to have health issues, and we are still going to enjoy fish. If we have all of that in perspective, I believe that it makes it definitely a no-brainer. Now, when we come to the commercial and industrial side, it follows a similar pattern. However, some of the large industries who are basically the bulk power producers or large producers have their own independent production of energy on site. So we go through the same process again. The capex that will be involved in producing solar today seems a little bit higher than if they had bought, let's say, a diesel generator. However, in 2022, any organization can access funding, which makes that capex shock much easier. So you can't really say it's going to cost me X amount to, produce electricity from solar, and it's like, a fifth cheaper for generators. I'm going to do that. No, there are so many ways you can get access to capital today that the repayment is going to be so seamless, right? But outside of that, the operations and maintenance cost of the solar far outweighs any benefit that the capex of the diesel could have given you, right? Because we know solar in itself requires very little maintenance, and even the maintenance cost is definitely very cheaper. So commercial and industrial organizations definitely have a cost benefit there. When you run the numbers versus producing power from solar versus, let's say, diesel, it's like night and day. It's just a simple no-brainer. So that's one of the reasons. And then also for the commercial and industrial entities, it's a global village now. The world is a global village now. It's very difficult to sit in Nigeria or in Ghana or in Senegal and do something and think the rest of the world is not going to know about it. So having a sustainability focused organization is very important these days. Some of the organizations locally do not see it until they have to go under a large acquisition or have to do a merger or looking for some, expansion capital from even IFC. And one of the requirements is your facility edge certified, which is an energy efficiency model, or are you using any form of renewable energy to offset carbon that you are producing, whether it's an industry or not. So from both the costs and then also the environmental benefit perspective, it's actually a no-brainer. But the question then is, if it's such a no-brainer, how is the acceleration not as fast as we hope it to be? Again, it boils down to capacity building. I remember sometime in 2016 when we started this whole clean energy agenda in West Africa, we almost seemed like professors than business people, because what we had to do was teach, train, teach, train, teach, train. And today we are seeing the results of some of the work that we put in. However, that capacity building needs to be done on a much larger scale. It needs to be done on a much government scale. There should be some government programs that are actually helping these industries, helping various individuals to understand the benefits that renewable energy can give them, and then help them accelerate in terms of clean energy.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kweku. And Patrick, finally, how can households and businesses achieve more remote power management and improve energy efficiency with renewable energy technologies?
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I think first thing first, it's important that we differentiate between what we mean by remote power management and energy efficiency. So remote power management is when you can monitor the energy demand and generation of any assets within a built environment, or it could be a building, for example. and also be able to kind of control systems to ensure that the power is more reliable and accessible. So this requires a lot more thinking in terms of kind of what are the assets in that kind of boundary or that environment, or if it's a building, and then what solutions are you using to communicate and interact with each of those assets and appliances within them. So, I mean, for example, currently, I think the power management solutions out there in the markets are very basic and they don't provide any added benefit to the customer. And so for now, I mean, at Pan Africa, our main goal is really to kind of integrate a lot of innovation into this. So we've kind of built an AI solution that can actually help optimize those customers' assets and ensure that more benefits provided to them in terms of energy cost savings, right? But then that's kind of from a power management and a monitoring control side of things. Now, when we look at energy efficiency, that's a little bit more different. I know power management is an example of energy efficiency, but energy efficiency comes in various forms. It could be as simple as educating the customer in terms of what they need to do to reduce the energy costs, down to actually implementing systems, energy conservation measures, which could be either replacing an old AC to a more inverter or newer AC, removing old lighting to kind of LED lighting, or really carrying out different reduction in energy cost or old inefficient assets and replacing with more energy efficient assets. Both of these solutions in the market, I mean, the various companies are looking at different aspects of this, but in Pan Africa, we offer both for free to the customers, because we believe that the customer has to kind of reduce the energy spend first before actually thinking about renewable energy. So energy efficiency and kind of understanding the customer's energy demand is the first step, and that has to be done before we introduce any renewable energy assets into that equation. So I think that really kind of sums it up. So to kind of answer your question, really is remote power management is good, is important, but the current solutions out there in Nigeria are very basic. And energy efficiency, it should be part of the renewable energy solutions. It shouldn't be separated.
Thank you very much for that answer, Patrick. I'll just quickly go to the Q&A box where we have a question. So the question is, which of the renewable energy options is more accessible and can work best for our energy ambitions in Africa? Who would like to take that answer?
So I can give it a good go. Then hopefully it works. So let's look at the various types of renewable energy solutions in the world, right? So I think let's just look at Africa. Let's look at the whole world and understand what's going on. So when it comes to the cheapest renewable energy sources at the moment across the world, it really falls down to two key technologies. One is solar, with solar photovoltaic systems, solar PV, and the second is wind, right? Now, there's a lot of conversations around hydrogen coming into the play, but I believe hydrogen really more is kind of an integrator rather than a renewable energy solution. And there's a lot of conversations being happened there, but that is still kind of on the lower TRL level, which is still kind of being understood in terms of how that technology really works and how it fits into the equation. So for Nigeria specifically and Africa, I definitely would say solar would be kind of the first option that comes to mind. And the reason why is because we're seeing kind of a huge reduction in price over the last couple of years on solar. And it's become very cost competitive when it comes to traditional sources of energy, which are more fossil fuel based, like diesel and petrol. So going forward, it will be interesting to examine wind in Africa. I think wind has a potential, and a lot are putting a blind eye to it. And part of the reason why I think that is kind of more complexities around wind compared to solar. Solar is kind of easier to deploy and easier to scale. So, but I think wind has a huge amount of benefit that needs to be considered, and a kind of an energy mix situation where a system is designed to be optimized at the lowest price. So that means you can either combine wind, hydrogen, or solar in the right amount to get a cheaper price. So to answer that question, from my kind of understanding and kind of extensive research in this space, solar is kind of a no-brainer. but we shouldn't put wind or hydrogen in the back burner. We should actually investigate that and potentially look at these assets as a mix of various solutions to optimize for a cheaper price.
Thank you very much for that, Patrick. The audience, the poll will be coming up shortly, so please engage with that. And don't forget to drop your questions in the Q&A box. Okay. It should be up on your screens now. Just give you a few minutes to go through that. So the first question reads, since the beginning of the ongoing global energy crisis, how high is the increase in your energy costs? Either 0 to 50%, 50 to 100%, 100% to 200. The following. Question 2 is, when discussing the switch to renewable energy, which of the following best describes you? I haven't explored any option. I've made some inquiries. I've read reviews and compared prices. I have checked for financing options, and I currently use renewable energy. And the final question is, how much will it cost to set up a renewable energy system that will meet the energy needs in your household or business? Okay, so whilst you're answering that, I will direct another question to Kweku. So in the face of the volatile global oil market, what initiatives can businesses and non-profits adopt to harness the unique opportunities presented by the growing clean energy market? And Patrick, I would also like to hear your answer to this. So once Kweku has given his answer, I would like you to share.
Sure, thanks very much. I think one of the biggest challenges that businesses and nonprofits face when they think about adoption of renewable energy is they look at it as a capital expenditure project. So first of all, where am I going to get the huge sum of money to do the project for? I don't have the experience to do it. I don't have the expertise to do it. I don't have the right staff that can manage that project. Should it be implemented, etc. And that creates a lot of anxieties, what is the probability that it's going to be a successful project? How am I going to, my return on investments, are they real? I've seen you make projections, but is it really going to happen? Am I going to be scammed? So all of these things run through, business leaders' heads when they have to make such decisions. I believe the responsibility then stays with developers, EPCs, and solution providers like Energy, to go out there, reach out to these guys and explain to them, we have solutions that allows you to just sit in the comfort of your office, focus on the business that brings you revenue or the nonprofits that creates the impact you're doing, and leave your power issues to us. But what I mean by that is there are innovative measures in adopting clean energy, which the companies need to see. And part of why they're not seeing is also marketing. And when you look at some of these measures, includes energy as a service, which comes as comfortable as it should be. The customer doesn't really bear any liability within the entire process. They are essentially substituting their production or their consumption of energy from the grid to solar, and then the energy service company like Energy comes on to take over that responsibility. There are also other models, including power purchase agreements, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in and if that is permissible. That also makes it very comfortable for these organizations to adopt. There are other lease to own measures, etc. So truly, I believe the solution here is what we as industry professionals have to do. We have to increase our marketing. We have to increase the communication to help these business leaders understand that transitioning from where you are at, which is most likely fossil fuels, to renewable energy is not your responsibility. All you have to do is find a great company that has a track record of doing what they do, allow them to bring some of the innovative measures that they have regarding that transition process, and just focus on what you do best and let them do, what they need to do. I see Energy did a collaboration with Sunfi for home owners domestically, and that's one of the brilliant, initiatives that domestic folks can adapt. But also for the commercial and industrial guys, where about 40% of the entire cost is going to energy, they have the ability to reduce that cost without any capital expenditure commitment, and also without a risk of the project. So we have to go out there, communicate it, disseminate that information, and most importantly, build the capacity of the decision makers to understand the solution and make the right decision for the organization.
Thank you very much for that, Kweku. And Patrick, do you have anything to add to what he said?
Yeah, I mean, it's important. I mean, the price volatility really, what we're seeing is as reflective of what's going on in kind of the Russia and Ukraine war, and a lot of that has had a knock-on effect on a lot of economies. So it's not just being faced in Africa, but across the world, we're seeing a lot of increase in terms of energy prices, and that is passed down to the consumer. In Nigeria, in the last 2 years, specifically, we've been keeping track of this, and we've seen over 200% increase in kind of the price for diesel, right? And that is astronomical, absolutely astronomical. We're already going through a very difficult time in Africa already. So for us to kind of get a bump in 2 years of 200% increase in the price of fuel, it's really bad, and it's affecting the economy, and we can see it affects everybody at the moment. Now, but let's not kind of be afraid. There is a hope out there, and our kind of greatest hope right now, especially when it comes to the businesses and individuals, is really kind of the proliferation of solar equipment in Nigeria. So we're seeing kind of the prices going down in terms of the price, in the dollar price, and they're not kind of affected by the kind of exchange rates and then the naira devaluation, but that also kind of seems to be a huge problem that a lot of people are facing in terms of affording these equipment. But we're seeing the actual price the global price of solar go down significantly. That can help us become more competitive to kind of mitigate against the risk of the price for diesel generators. Diesel. Now, also, it's important that customers or developers like Pan Africa Energy and the rest of the other companies in this space are looking at kind of opportunities for providing flexible payment options to customers. So for a typical business, I'll give an example of a business that we worked with recently. They were spending over 200,000 naira a month in diesel fuel. When we came in, we were able to kind of work on a financing solution that allows them to kind of meet all the energy needs, but also be able to pay just about 140,000 naira per month. So they are automatically saving about 60,000 naira a month. So these are the kind of initiatives and services that should really be out there to get these prices down, allow people to be able to afford the solutions, and then move forward to kind of scale up these solutions across Africa. Now, on the second question, where you talked about not-for-profit organizations, I know there's a couple of other donor organizations out there in Africa who actually have created a pot of funding that really should be aimed at providing benefits, might be operational benefits like energy consumption reduction, to non-for-profit organizations. Example of one of those initiatives was the All-On Social Solar Initiative, which was kind of launched. We're also working with a couple of other donor organizations to extend those benefits to non-for-profits in Africa, more specifically Nigeria. And these are the kind of things that we want to see more of, because yes, I mean, it's very difficult affording electricity for everyone across the world at the moment, and various things and things needs to be put into place to kind of solve those problems. And we're seeing some people rising up to the plate, but I think the speed at which they're rising up to the plate is still quite slow, and there needs to be a lot more activities done in that area.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that answer, Patrick. We have some questions coming in. One of our viewers on YouTube, Kunle Ewoso, has stated that he's just started a small enterprise in clean energy business and is asking for advice on improving and making an impact. I'll direct this to Kweku.
Sure, I'll attempt to tackle that. I think most often when we look at businesses or we start businesses, the questions that we are supposed to ask ourselves, we fail to. So what do I mean by that? As an entrepreneur starting within the clean energy space, first of all, what problem are you solving? It's a large value chain, right? Which aspect of it are you solving? Is it from the equipment side? Is it from the end user side? Is it anywhere in between the transmission side? Are you looking at software as a service to provide some type of value to the production and transmission and usage of the renewable energy, etc. After you've identified that problem, you should also look at the value that you are creating within the ecosystem. These two things are very important. Now, once you're able to identify that, then you have created a very narrow focus on what your solutions and what your niche is. From there, I believe the best thing you should do is mentorship. Find organizations that have done what you're trying to do, offer to provide some type of value to them at a very nominal fee or potentially for free, so you can understand. Now, I say this because the clean energy space is a very holistic sector. It's not a sector that you can just remain an engineer for the rest of your life and be successful. You will start off as an engineer, but over the course of your career, you have to learn something around finance, you have to learn something around business development, you have to learn something around transmission. There always has to be some type of ongoing personal development there. So I believe the best way to start is to find great mentors who are already doing what you're doing so that you can understand how they run their business. But most importantly, you can also understand how they deploy their solutions to their customers. Customer psychology around clean energy is one of the biggest difficulties in accelerating, this solution, because first of all, it's fairly new, and whenever there's a new solution in the market, you have your innovation curve where you have your innovators, early adopters. I can say potentially in Africa or in the South region, we are somewhere around the early adopters, right? So even those that are confident about the solution and want to get it, you still have to convince them. And it's typically difficult to do that when you have no experience. But once you can hang around entrepreneurs who have done that before, you can learn how to deal with some of those, customer psychologies and break through some of those barriers and, give yourself time. I think sometimes when we start enterprises, we want to be successful in 6 months. Success takes a lot of time. And if you're able to pace yourself and grow very steadily, I think in the next couple of years, you should one of the leading organizations in the South region.
Thank you very much, Kweku. We have another question from Bartholomew Agbakuo. Apologies if I've mispronounced that. So his question is, how can one, so he was referring to you, Patrick, and Kweku mentioning capacity building, and he says he knows a lot of people wanting to build careers in renewable energy. So his question is, how can one have access to the required knowledge to develop these skills with little to no cost? I think I'll direct that to you, Patrick.
Okay, no, thank you so much. That's a very good question. I'm always an advocate for education, coming from an background in education. And at the moment, where you kind of learn to kind of work on your renewable energy solutions or train yourself on renewable energy solutions is very important. I know, from my understanding, I know there's a couple of institutions supported by GIZ, which is kind of an arm of the German government in Nigeria, who are specifically aimed at capacity development and training people in the sector to get in. So probably look into NESP. I might want to just Google that a little bit. NESP training programs for renewable energy. That might be a good source that I can think about right now. Alternatively, there are kind of other, maybe you want to do some more home self-thought programs. There are a couple of self-thought programs out there that you can do some searches around. Or maybe you want to intern for one of these companies, maybe spend some time with some renewable energy companies out there, maybe come to Pan Africa. We have a couple of internship roles available. We're based in Lagos, so you kind of have to be in Lagos. But then again, happy to kind of guide people through that process. We really want the best engineers in the world to really kind of solve our energy problems in Africa. So you would be kind of trained to as equal to that level of kind of one of the best engineers in the world. And it's important that there's so much talent in Nigeria, there's so much talent in Africa. These things is not really rocket science in kind of in a layman term, but it's really, you got to put yourself out there to seek this knowledge, and don't be ashamed to kind of reach out to people and ask questions, especially people who you feel can kind of get you the answers. So other than that, I can't even recommend anything more. But you should really kind of put yourself out there and trying to kind of reach out to people to find out more information. Those are the recommendations I can make, but probably limited to my knowledge as well.
Sure, and then if I may, I'll just follow up quickly on doc stuff, putting yourself out there. I think that's very important. One of the things that we should also look at is, and if I could get some interaction, I'm curious to know what industry that you're currently in, or what experience or education that you have. Mostly when people think about the renewable energy space, they think about renewable energy engineering. I have to go and learn about engineering. No, I'm not an engineer, but I'm in the renewable energy space. So what I can say is that leverage what you currently have. What you currently have is always a foundation, whether it is customer service, whether it is marketing, whether it is finance, whether it is business development, whatever it is you're currently doing, it's a foundation. There's a reason why you started off your life with that, right? You've done that for a couple of years, you understand that. Now, what you then do is you pivot, you leverage that as foundation, and then you pivot into the renewable energy industry. So if your background is, let's say, marketing, ask yourself, let me do a research on renewable energy companies and let me see the loopholes in their marketing strategies. Let me see how they're not able to reach, their intended audience, etc. At that point, you are going into the industry from a value creation perspective. Not just that, you are also increasing your ability to learn. What I've noticed is that learning becomes very easy when you are learning from a foundation of strength versus learning from a foundation of weakness. So when you're going into any type of sector that you have no clue about, you feel very stupid because they throw a lot of jargons around, and you ask yourself, do I really have a degree? Versus when you come from an area of strength, all you have to do is just focus on that area of strength. So for instance, if it's marketing, understand the marketing strategies that can be deployed in the renewable energy sector that makes sense. Once you've done that research, as Doc said, one of the first things you can do is reach out to Doc and say, hey, Doc, I studied your company's website and I looked at your marketing communication channels, and I think there are a few ways you can improve it. I'll be happy to come and intern in your organization to do that. What's going to happen when you intern in Doc's organization, solving his problem for him, is you are going to learn other things in the renewable energy industry. That is going to continually build your capacity. Now you are an insider. Now you can understand where are the other opportunities for me, whether in Doc's company or in other companies or in the industry as a whole. And at that point, you have a very solid foundation to really get yourself in. I've had a lot of people trying to get into the renewable energy space, and it's more like pie in the sky ideas or hopes and aspirations versus there's a practical way. And I think once we go the practical route, there's much success over a much shorter period of time.
Thank you very much for that answer, Kweko and Patrick. And to add to what they said, Energy is actually undergoing an installer program where installers from all across the country can come to our facility and learn about our product in particular. And as Kweko mentioned, we are partnered with Sunfire, who also will be giving a tutorial and courses on their own products and how you can integrate and reach the target market. Similarly, Liberty Amechi, thank you for your question. She's CEO of Author Energy, also stated that their company has a training facility in Port Harcourt. So you could also reach out to them. And she also has a question regarding hydrogen fuel. She asks more emphasis on, so there is more emphasis on other renewable energy sources, but hydrogen fuel. What could be the reason? Can I invite Kweku to answer this?
Sure, I'll address it very, very quickly, and then maybe Doc can throw some more light on that. So I think it has to do mostly with the feasibility of it. So the psychology behind every capital investment is there should be some historical data that shows that, first of all, the technology works, is going to produce the power that it says it's going to produce, and most importantly, whoever the off-taker is going to pay. Because when you look at the, it's not just invention, it is economic viability. If the technology is there and nobody's going to pay for it, then it doesn't make any sense. And the stakeholders of the sector that fuels, the innovation of new technology is financing. As of now, financiers are more comfortable with solar because it's much more proven. If you take a solar proposal to a bank, they will look at it versus if you take a hydrogen, type of opportunity. Where there's opportunity for funding within the hydrogen space as typically catalytic funding, which is your grants and DFIs, and that is their role, to push the envelope so that new technologies can be formed. So I believe it's so much of a commercial reason versus it says the viability of the technology itself. However, it's not a problem that cannot be solved. Solar had the same issue about 20 years ago. And today, solar is very easily funded. So I believe the ones that there has been a huge focus on hydrogen by the DFI societies and other catalytic funding agencies. And once they continue to fund a lot of these studies and these feasibility studies, etc., then there is available data that debt and equity financiers can jump onto and say, okay, you know what? I'm confident in your solution. I know your off-taker will continue to pay for the entire period of the PPA. And because of that, I'll fund that particular project. It's at that point that we can see scale. So I believe it's just really a matter of time. But I'll let Doc throw in some more.
Yeah, no, I like the fact that you kind of covered that from kind of a business point of view and deployment point of view. But it will be worth just kind of diving a little bit into kind of what the technical differences between hydrogen and the other sources of energy out there, and why hydrogen is looking as an attractive solution, but also not attractive. It depends on the use case, right? So the key benefits for hydrogen that we're seeing is kind of the ability to store energy and host it for a longer duration period, right? Longer duration is kind of more hours. You can have energy stored in one place for more hours. And also when it comes to kind of the carbon footprint of hydrogen is much more less than kind of compared to other energy sources, because the kind of when you split hydrogen, the kind of the byproduct at the end of it is water. So you are kind of using it in a more environmentally friendly way. Now, when technologies are new, they are very expensive, right? So it's always important that we think about the cost. So like what Mr. Kweku said, in terms of this catalytic funding, I dare to really kind of showcase that feasibility, prove that, okay, from a cost perspective, technology perspective, all these things actually match before it goes ahead to kind of become a business as usual solution. So that's kind of the key thing. I mean, also to counteract this, I'm a little bit on the fence when it comes to hydrogen, because I feel that by the time hydrogen gets to a point that is kind of commercially ready for Africa, the energy density in our storage options currently, like lithium-ion systems, sodium-ion systems, and the rest of other types of batteries out there, will become much more improved. That would actually beat the economics for hydrogen for certain applications like household energy consumptions, CNI energy consumptions, and kind of short distance travel. But maybe when it comes to longer distance travel, high goods vehicle, and probably more kind of a larger scale solutions for storage and power, I think hydrogen has a role to play, but it's still kind of in the early stages of development. So we're going to keep an eye on it. But I don't think in terms of in the short scale, I don't think you get any hydrogen reactors in anyone's home anytime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Patrick and Kweku. So we have another question here from Engineer David Mbaku. He was asking if you can refer of any floating solar photovoltaic manufacturers and technologies, as he would like to save land for agriculture. I guess this is open to both of you. If you do know any of that, we can send that to him.
Sorry, can you repeat that question again? I didn't catch that.
Okay, if you know of any photovoltaic manufacturers for floating cells to save land for agriculture.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, off my head, I can't remember now, but there are companies out there that specifically look at floating solar. It's an interesting concept. I've been involved in a couple of international projects who actually deploy some floating solar. Currently, we operate in the urban area where land seems to be, I mean, it's like Lagos, right? Where land seems to be a big deal. But there's a lot of water bodies around. So it's definitely be interesting to see that happens. If anybody has a project around that, please send it to me. Let me look at that. But yeah, I don't know off my head of any company, but I think it's an interesting concept that should be looked into.
Thank you very much for that, Patrick. And lastly, what is the government doing to make renewable energy transition easier and more affordable to homes? Direct that to you, Kweku.
Sure, I can address this from my home country, Ghana, although I work within the West African sub-region. So, for instance, in Ghana, the government has been quite slow, I must be honest. And one of the infrastructure improvements which should have happened much sooner was the net metering, which was going to allow for domestic homeowners to really export power back into the grid, for credit, etc. That has quite delayed. However, I would say the government has still been quite progressive from that perspective. So as far as domestic is concerned, those are one of the main things that can help these customers, because at the end of the day, what we try to do as solution providers on the domestic side is we try not to oversize plants for the end user. And that becomes a little difficult when you have to really gauge or estimate what their exact power consumption is on a constant level, and being able to deploy that solution. So if there's an existence and very robust net metering system, then it eases up that responsibility a little bit. There are a lot of customers that ask, so what happens if I produce more power than I need? Then your question is, I don't know. Nothing happens because you can put it back into the grid. That is definitely a turn-off for them. Also because they know in the Western communities, Germany, USA, etc., all that infrastructure is prevalent, so they know that works. When they go on YouTube, that's what they see. So when they come locally and they speak to the experts, and that is typically non-existent, it becomes a challenge. I believe the government accelerating those efforts is very important. And then outside of that, I also believe that the government can also have, again, capacity building programs. We have seen a lot of electrical engineers transition into the renewable energy space, but mostly has been by their own accord, trying to gather some funds to go do training, etc. I believe if the government can take up some of those responsibilities and have training programs that can transition people already in the power space into the renewable energy space, we'll see a lot more solution providers. And once we have a lot more solution providers, there's an army that can penetrate that solution for the domestic customer to see the benefits of renewable energy.
Thank you very much for that, Kweku. And to Patrick, I want to direct another question to you. So we have renewable companies seem to target small groups, estates, markets, areas, rural communities, but don't appear to work hand in hand with distributed companies responsible for providing electricity around the country. what efforts and being out in place by your renewable companies to engage more of these distribution companies?
Okay, no, I love that question. I actually had that as one of the points to make across, but I didn't even get the time to talk at the time. So it's a very good question. I love that question so much. And the reason why I love that question is, if we look at the urban areas where most of the discos are responsible for ensuring power is going to people's homes and businesses, some of those people in those urban areas are still getting less than 8 hours of supply a day of electricity, right? So I mean, we've heard the huge kind of up NEPA excitement when light comes on, and then there's no light after a while, and these are issues that the typical Nigerian face. So yes, there needs to be much more engagement with the discos, right? And ensuring that we can have those conversations with them. I think renewable energy developers like Pan Africa and so forth should kind of obviously work hand in hand with discos. But the issue is this technology is relatively new, and the discos are also having their own challenges in terms of payment collections, being able to kind of ensure that people can pay for these electricity and ensure that they have the right metering structure in place to kind of reward if we're feeding electricity back into the grid, or if people can pay for the electricity. So that's a big problem for the disco, and that's where they're spending most of their time into and support we're doing. But I think those conversations should be had. And I know some discos are a lot forward thinking than others. Some has actually thought about incorporating these solar energy and other clean energy assets as part of their network. And there's conversations being had and programs being in place. But if we understand certain things, the kind of systems out there that these discos are actually using, operating, kind of needs a lot more improvements. So a lot more innovation needs to kind of be accepted and taken in. So I think from a leadership perspective, there needs to kind of be a direction to incorporate some of this innovation into the disco network that can be able to allow renewable energy assets to feed into those networks. For example, I'll give you kind of a huge a key project which I was involved in the UK, where the discos, so in the UK it's called DNOs, distribution network operators. They, as part of kind of their revenue model, is really to kind of innovation is part of the revenue model. Before they get paid, they have to make sure they innovate, right? And that is kind of the work that we want to kind of see in Nigeria. Is, for example, I mean, some of these discos have areas in the network where they have constraints. So let's say there's too many people in this small area and served by one transformer. That transformer is kind of overloaded and it's constrained. So it's always going to be failing. But instead of that happening, when innovation comes into place, there's different things that can go to those networks to provide benefits. And one example could be an energy storage asset, right, where you can store the power and distribute it at the right time. Another example could be a phase changer asset, where you can change between different phases at different points of time to kind of improve the network. So there's a whole lot of new products and stuff in the market that is ready to that is being offered to discos, but the network is not actually advanced enough to incorporate these new systems. So they definitely need a lot of support. They can't do it by themselves, and this is where the government really should come in and bring the discos into these energy conversations. Right? We should be in this session. There should be someone from the discos in here having a conversation of how we integrating these new energy assets into the network, right? These are the kind of conversations that should be had. So I'm actually very passionate about that topic, but it's very challenging. It has so many ends to fill. But over the period of time, as this technology becomes better, there's a question of, do we even need them in the future, right? So there's another question around that. So I say, listen, by the time the price for batteries become so cheap that everybody can reach afford the system, the current way of the electricity network setup would be completely different. And we need to really consider that as an option. So going forward, I really welcome Discos to be part of these conversations because we really want to hear from them in terms of what are they doing to kind of incorporate these technologies.
Thank you very much, Patrick. It was a brilliant question, and thanks for that insight. So going back to, are there any free courses that can be taken for renewable energy? Someone on our YouTube channel mentioned that the LSETF training program is 100% free, so you can consider looking into that. And I will also say that webinars as well are a great way to learn. So find as many as possible, join as many as possible, join the conversation. And that's also a method in which you can build your knowledge regarding renewable energy. Okay, and I think that's all the questions we have from the audience. If you have any more, please send them through and we'll send you an email with a response to those. Okay, and the poll results. Let's have a look through at those. While that's being pulled up, I do want to mention that Anergy is having a promotion. So if you're thinking about transitioning into renewable energy, you should look into that and the opportunity to win amazing prizes as well. So for our poll results, let's go through that really quickly. The first question, since the beginning of the ongoing global crisis, how high is the increase in your energy costs? Majority of people, 45%, have voted 50 to 100%. And we also know the price of diesel in Nigeria has increased. Also, the cost of living is a massive topic in the UK. People complaining that the energy bills are increasing by almost 500%. So considering that fact, seeing a rise of majority, seeing a rise in 50 to 100%, I wouldn't say it's a win compared to other people, but compared to other people, it is significantly less. Question 2, when discussing the switch to renewable energy, which of the following best describes you? Majority of people have said, I have made some inquiries, and I mean, we will all have looked into either solar or inverter systems, that sort of thing, especially in Nigeria, in a way to mitigate the costs and also using diesel as well. The next question, the next most popular answer is, I haven't explored any other options. And I suppose that will also lead into the fact that it is expensive. I think that's a generally known fact. It is expensive, and that does deter people from looking into it, even just as could it be an option. And finally, question 3, how much will it cost to set up a renewable energy system that will meet the energy need in your household or business? So the most popular answer, again, with 48%, is between $5,000 and $50,000. That's understandable. So as mentioned, cost is a big deterrent for people and organizations wishing to transition to renewable energy. So hopefully as time goes on, as Kweku had mentioned, the cost of components decreasing, and as Patrick mentioned, communications from government policies, organizations, that would increase as well. Oh, but we have one final question from the audience. Which is the best storage solution or technology that can be recommended? Patrick, would you like to answer this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can, best is kind of subjective really, but it's really depending on a couple of things: how much capital you have, how much money you have to spend on it, what are you using it for. So maybe you're using it for kind of high power appliances, or maybe small lower powered appliances. So it's really subjective, but a favorable technology which kind of what Pan Africa mainly deploys, and we invest a lot of our research and development into, it's centered around lithium-ion based technology. So lithium batteries, really kind of the layman term in Nigeria, is what it's called. Now, what is kind of the benefits of lithium-ion batteries compared to other type of batteries out there? So I think lithium-ion batteries mainly you can kind of store energy in a smaller space for a longer period of, more energy in a smaller space for a longer period of time. So when it comes to having air conditioning units and more heavier appliances in your system, you're better off going with a lithium-ion based solution, and at least that can last you between 5 to 10 years, and without you having actually to worried about replacing those systems. So yeah, I think that's kind of it for now. I know there's a lot of new other technologies that we're working on, but I think for now we mainly power our systems with lithium-ion batteries.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And a final question for you, Kweku. How can we attract other renewable energy projects in Africa and Nigeria as a whole, as opposed to just solar?
Can you go over the question again?
So the question reads, how can we attract other renewable energy projects in Africa and Nigeria as a whole?
Right. So I think I'll answer this question in two phases. One is from a centralized, renewable energy power production perspective, and then two from a decentralized perspective, because those require two different strategies. From a centralized perspective, the government must be open and willing to explore new renewable energy technologies. That comes with leadership mandates, that comes with investments, that comes with policy, etc. Until the government does that, we will still be doing our bread and butter, oil and gas. So there has to be government willingness to want to do that. Now, after they've done that research, they've invested, then they are in a position to attract different stakeholders who will be willing to come in. In 2022, with what has happened in Egypt, etc., there are willing stakeholders that are looking to help climate action. So we are no longer in, 10 years ago where it was difficult to attract funding or partnerships for these type of projects. Today, they are ready. The problem has been our leadership. Our leadership has to be more open-minded. They have to be forward-thinking, and most importantly, they have to invest in research, in that area. From a decentralized perspective, I would say it typically would trickle down from the centralized way again. One of the reasons why solar has become very prevalent and very easy is it's being leveraged from the top as of now. So when that happens, once there's government recognition, there's policy around that, there's tax incentive on import duties, there is some type of regulation around how solar can be used. There is an agency that is dedicated to making sure that solar projects are done in a certain way, etc. Until that whole infrastructure is built, you can't say, it's very difficult to say, I want to do hydrogen in my house, right? What infrastructure supports that? So everything boils down back to leadership. I believe once, the government is able to be open-minded, forward-thinking, and think about how Africa as a whole can harness renewable energy, they will put a lot of the resources there. And once those resources goes there, it will trickle down to the domestic and decentralized side. So that would be my simple answer for that.
Thank you very much, Kweku. In the interest of time, any questions that haven't been answered, we will get them answered and sent to you directly. This was also recorded, so you will get a copy of this as well. I want to say a massive thank you to our panelists, Dr. Patrick and Kweku. Thank you for your time, for your expertise and your insights. And also thank you to the audience for your insightful questions, for taking the time to join the conversation, and for just the community in general. So as mentioned, to learn more about renewable energy, Energy does have webinars every quarter. This is unfortunately the last one for the year. So the next one will happen next year, 2023. Please look out for that. And once again, thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you for the energy.
All right,
Thank you too. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, have a nice day.